I think I'm going soft in my old age. I'm enjoying this book, Royal Service by Stephen Barry, far too much because I can let my defenses down and I can just take a joyful romp through all the pages and enjoy all the tales he tells. Now, the next bit I have to say is filling me with fear because I have to actually say who he was. And every time I pronounce valet or valet, I get told off in the comments because I've made two videos. The first one, not about this, but the first one I said valet because I've always said valet. And a lady told me quite crisply in the comments that it is not valet. Valet is a car service, and in good country houses in England, it is valet. Okay, so about a month later, I made another video and I said valet, thinking that I was making everybody happy. And then someone said in the comment very nicely, well, I really enjoyed your video, but you mispronounced valet. It's valet. So then I was like, I'm not going to win on this. I am not going to win on this. So I looked up the English Oxford Dictionary and now it's as clear as mud because they gave me three alternatives and one of them was valet, one of them was valet, and then the other one was a strange emphasis where it's valet, but instead of the emphasis being on the lay part, it's on the va. So, oh, I don't know. So look, I'm going to say valet. And if you can't handle it, I apologise in advance. I must say, though, the word did come from the French, so it makes sense to me to say valet. But the English Oxford Dictionary does say that all are correct. Okay, so that's the end of that subject. You say valet and I say valet. Anyway, on with the story. Now, there's really charming stories in this book. It's just lovely. Actually, I think this may have been a sanctioned book because on his way out the door, I think that he may have been given permission to do a rather tame sanctioned book. Now, a lady told me in the comments that there's another book. I had no idea. Now, I haven't looked into this yet, but she said there was another Stephen Barry book called Royal Secrets. Now, that would be a lot juicier, wouldn't it? So, but there's charming stories in this, and I just want to share with you. In September 1980, the then Prince Charles, and I'm just going to call him Prince Charles from now because I can't say then Prince Charles through the whole video. Prince Charles purchased his first home, Highgrove, September 1980. And like all men that don't know how to decorate, he just painted the whole thing white. And he figured that whoever his future wife would be, and we all know who that was, would actually go through and decorate it as she wished. Now, that's actually a lovely story about Lady Diana Spencer and Prince Charles as well, because after their marriage, when they got back from the honeymoon, she excitedly, she'd spent a lot of time on it, sort of pre-marriage. And when they got back from their honeymoon, she excitedly sort of said, close your eyes, and sort of took him around all the rooms and showed him every room, and he hadn't seen it yet. And he really, really loved it. He loved it. So that was a happy moment because he thought that she'd done a beautiful job and he just loved it. And, you know, there were happy times. There were happy times. Trust me. Anyway, he's a bachelor at this stage and he's off and he's got his policeman, he's got Stephen Barry, and off they go for Highgrove for the weekend, for the moving in weekend. And Stephen Barry says that he just got stuck in. Like, it sounds like even he was really surprised. Like, he was hauling boxes and wouldn't let anyone help him and was moving everything in all to the rooms and everything and unpacking and they got two cleaning women in from the local village to just sort of, you know, make sure the cupboards were nice and clean before they started putting all this stuff in. And he had quite a bit because he had 21st birthday gifts. He had things from his world tours that were gifts, presumably stuff that he liked. I mean, I'm sure he left behind all the stuff that he didn't like. And he had quite a bit to move into Highgrove. Now, he didn't worry about furniture that much because he knew that that when he got married, that his wife would want to choose all the furniture. So he sent Stephen Barry off to Harvey Nichols with instructions to, get a bed and bedside tables and lamps and things, but don't get anything too expensive, he said, but comfortable, but not too expensive. And so he said, because he said the furniture would end up in the servants' quarters once he got married. Sorry, I'm sure he said staff. Queen Elizabeth II actually said, when asked once by someone, how many servants do you have? And she said, well, none. And they looked shocked. And she said, but I do have, and then she named the number of staff. She emphasised that. So that was a little aside. That's another story. So they work hard all day and they get everything away in the cupboards. And then he turns to Stephen Barry and he says, can you cook? And Stephen Barry says, his repertoire is quite limited, but he's sure he could rustle up something. So they only had like a little mini fridge that had some eggs and butter in it. And the gardener had cut them some spinach from his new overgrown garden. So they made eggs Florentine, Stephen Barry said, and they all sat around. The policeman, Stephen Barry, and Prince Charles sat around on 3 chairs and ate their eggs. And they just had a marvellous weekend. And he describes that by the end of the weekend, they were all so exhausted, like they were just trying to pack in as much as they could. They had made one room habitable and it had a TV in it. But again, they didn't have any furniture. So they made bacon sandwiches and laid around on the rugs and watched TV. I just love that. I could just picture it. Now, I'm going to read you a little bit. This is on a future weekend, a few weeks later. And this is Prince Charles and this is Stephen Barry describing him at Highgrove. The prince pottered about there very happily. Highgrove was his first home and he wanted to hang his own pictures, which is quite hard to do. And actually, hanging your own pictures is a commitment. I mean, that's a brave thing to do. When you put that nail in the wall, you're committed, aren't you? I hate hanging pictures. I always feel like it's going to be crooked, wrong, or in the wrong position. Anyway, he liked to hang his own pictures. I guess he painted a lot of them and arrange all his own treasures. He liked those weekends because he was doing something ordinary that everyone who buys a new house enjoys. Well, I guess we enjoy it. I would much rather have staff unpack everything, hang all the pictures, do everything, and I just walk in and go, oh, I'm home. That would be just my idea of bliss. There's also other cute stories in this book, and also I can clear up a juicy one too. But Stephen Barry is saying that Prince Charles is rather careful with his money. And it was Stephen Barry's job to sort of pay for things because he used to get a float and he would follow behind him and pay for things and he would tip staff. So if they went to even a private house for a house party, it was customary to tip the staff that took care of them. And he used to go on a formula of paying £10 for the prince, for people that looked after the prince, and £5 for people that looked after him, because presumably he and the policemen were looked after and they were paid £5 for looking after them. Sounds like a pretty good gig, really, doesn't it? So on the way back from these house parties or staying in hotels, he would invariably ask Stephen Barry, how much did we leave? And Stephen Barry would usually say, if it was average service, oh, £20, sir. And if it was really good service, he would leave £50. But whenever he would, which is a lot, back in the 80s. And whenever he would leave £50, Prince Charles would say, oh, that seems rather steep. And when he would leave £20, he would nod, satisfied. But if he was happy with the service, he would say, just before they would leave, he'd say, I think we'll leave a little more this time, Stephen. When he used to get his clothes, they used to get them sent in, his shirts, and also he used to get the barber used to come in to do his hair, and shoes used to come in and everything, and they would be laid out. And Stephen Barry used to actually lay them out in order of price. So he'd have the lower end, middle and upper. But he stopped doing that because he noticed that Prince Charles would always pick the mid-range priced items. Like, even if he liked another shirt more, like he could see his eye go for something a little higher end, but he'd always, pick the mid-range stuff. So he started to sort of take away prices and arrange them more haphazardly to force him to choose something that he genuinely liked. And he would say, "Oh, what are the prices of these, Stephen?" And he'd say, "I have no idea, sir." But he did. And when Diana came along, I think that's where a little bit of tension started to show in the book, just slightly, because Diana sort of weighed in on Charles's fashion and on his haircuts. And a good thing too, because he did look a lot trendier by the time Diana came along. His haircut did improve. It did. And he used to trend himself up. He looked more a man of the moment. And, he stopped dressing like someone who was 50 or 60 years of age back then. And but that was a point of contention, and Stephen Barry used to say to her very politely, "Oh, I don't think he'll go for that." And then Diana would say, "Oh, I'm sure he'll love it." And then Stephen Barry would be fuming because the next day Charles would skip down to breakfast with the light blue cashmere pullover that Diana had bought him. There was a clearing up of one juicy tidbit. Now, like I said, I feel like this book was actually sort of sanctioned, a little bit like Angela Kelly's with the Queen, because it seems very helpful to Charles. But anyway, the scandal that happened when the royal train went off to a siding before the royal marriage, and it was reported that Lady Diana Spencer had snuck there during the night and had spent the night with Charles, because evidently some blonde-haired woman had been seen entering the royal carriages, so to speak. And Stephen Barry said there's no way, because there was only 4 carriages and he had one, the policeman had another one, Charles had another one, and the staff, the catering staff had another one. So that was all the 4 carriages taken up. Now, I don't know why that means that someone couldn't have visited Charles in his carriage, but Stephen says there is no way that anyone could have visited Prince Charles without us all knowing. And if he did know, there was no way he was letting on. And then, of course, when the papers didn't get anywhere with the Lady Diana Spencer story, they then later on, years later, the conjecture was that it was actually Camilla. But we'll never know, because Stephen Barry is staying steadfast and true, and he is not letting us know the real story about the royal train. Now, the sad note about Stephen Barry is he actually died of AIDS about 5 years after writing this book, about 5 years after leaving the royal employ. And I hope he had a ball. I hope he had a really great 5 years. It's such a pity. He seems like such a nice man. I wish he could have, lived and seen the fact that, if you were gay, you could actually fall in love and get married. I wish he had experienced that and had that life. And, it's just so sad, because he just seems like such a wonderful, wonderful person, and someone that I would just love to sit and have a glass of champagne with and get all the royal goss. Although he was so careful, he probably wouldn't have told me any. I'll see you all again very soon. Leave your comments down below or any little extra tidbits that you know about Stephen Barry, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.